17?
No, that's, hello and welcome back to the Senate Committee on Government Operations meeting of Tuesday, April 22nd. We're going to take a quick look at some proposed language, which is possibly going to be added to the elections bill, which is H474. Lauren Hibbert, the Deputy Secretary of State, has joined us. And we had also, and I sent it to every committee member, from Tim Devlin, who said that he had spoken with Tucker and then spoke with Lauren and Elections Director Sheehan about possible amendments. Below are his notes on the various proposed amendments from the committee. If you remember back, you can join us if you'd like.
Can I bring Sean Sheehan up with me? Is that okay?
Absolutely. He would feel lonesome if you left him at work.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
More importantly, I would feel lonely.
I'm sorry, are we looking at something that actually it's the statute in Title 17 with
It
no
should be
precursor?
It should be draft 1.1.
Yeah, I know. Need that.
I'll do a make forward.
No, I've got all these things here.
Yep.
Yeah, on 474, all I have is this thing. It doesn't say any draft. It just says,
Okay, go to the next one, because the first time I sent it, for some reason, when I try to attach attachments on
okay,
this iPad, it doesn't do it. So I had to go in the lounge and send it there. I can see
and
it
that
now.
says it's for 472.
Okay,
Okay,
well, let me just see if the committee remembers when we were talking last week, we had, I think, 4, could have been 3, but I think it was 4 potential changes. One of them was a striking of the electronic voting provision, which is in the bill. Then there was a thing which moved the 6th week back to the, or 5th week back to the 6th week. There was another one that blank votes be counted. Is this?
Yeah,
refreshing?
it's all coming back.
So,
no.
as soon as Allison can find it,
I just
No, it's interesting. It didn't come to me. I don't have, I have 472, but not 474.
well, I
It
think
is-
Senator White just sent it to you.
This is 472, the Office of
No.
Professional Regulation.
No.
This is not an elections bill.
No, 474 is what you,
I know that. And so I'm looking for that, but
would you like to borrow my iPad?
maybe we could just print it out,
Sure.
which would be great. Because oddly, believe it, I have,
And for someone who's so close to their birthday, I find that just,
I know, maybe this tells you something about what it means to turn 70. Except actually, it has nothing to do with me because it's just not there.
okay.
I have this is what I got from you for 474. I just want you to see that I'm not insane here.
Yeah, no, I forwarded to Dora.
That's what I have on 472. I mean, on 474. I have the statute, but that's not an amendment.
No, but these, the yellow
Okay, so this
portions are
this is
the
what you,
things.
okay.
Yeah.
So, sorry, it isn't a draft. All I was trying to say, I was looking for something that said draft 1.1 that didn't exist.
Okay,
Thank you.
so welcome, Secretary of State members.
Thank you so much. For the record, Lauren Hibbert, Deputy Secretary of State.
Sean Sheehan, Elections Director.
And in addition to the proposed amendments that I understand are coming out of this committee, we had some that we also talked about with Tim, and we're happy to go in any order or answer any questions. We don't have a formalized script here for our disposal. So if you want
Fire
to,
away.
do you want us to go first on the things that we are seeking your amendment on?
Yeah.
Okay. The first, and we don't have it concretely yet, but we do want to flag for this committee that there was an amendment on the House floor about the write-in provisions. And we are still working through what is a good balance between making something be operational and ensuring that there's adequate access to democracy. So currently in the bill, it says that in order to be counted as a write-in candidate, you need to register with the Secretary of State by the close of business on Election Day.
Right.
And we have concerns about that from an operations standpoint because first and foremost, most clerks are not in their offices on Election Day. They're in a polling location, which may or may not have internet and a printer, because what they will need to do is print out their tally sheet. And because they need the internet and a computer to do so, election day is not an ideal, it is not an ideal day to do that. And because of the security concerns that we have had related to attacks on our systems, which without getting into great detail, are very legitimate. We have been asking clerks to print out their tally sheets the Friday before an election.
Okay.
So that that they go into the weekend with security. So we would ideally like the write-in registration deadline to be no later than noon on Friday. Now, there's a lot of concerns about this limiting access to democracy. And we have really been trying to balance that concern, thinking about all of the ways that people can get on the ballot, and that there's quite a bit of time to do so in quite a different amount of ways. If you think about the party process, the independent process, the party nomination process, and so we've been thinking about that, trying to look at what everyone who's a named candidate has to do to get on the ballot. It's considerably further out than the Friday before election day. We also have been really talking about in-house that these are candidates for House, Senate, and statewide positions. So it's really important to distinguish this from local elections where people do wake up in the morning and decide to run for something. But we have had a hard time thinking through when somebody would wake up and launch a write-in campaign for governor the day of the election day, or even House member. We also are trying to think about triggers for automatic counting of all write-in candidates. And we think that death of a named candidate on the ballot would be an appropriate time, or lack of any named candidate on the ballot. So, for instance, if in Montpelier there was not a named Democrat on the primary ballot, then it would make sense that the clerk in Montpelier had to count all of the write-ins in that race. That makes sense. Or, God forbid, the named candidate on the Democratic ballot in Montpelier, or one of them dies, then it would make sense before the election. Then it would make sense to count all of the write-ins on that day. So we are still trying to come up with that balance. Again, trying to think about the balance of efficiency and how we would operationalize it with making sure that there's adequate access to democracy, both for the candidate and for voters. And, you know, if someone is serious about wanting to have a write-in campaign, right now, we think that noon on Friday gives them enough time to really think about doing it, and then time to start standing outside and campaigning for themselves, which we think is what anyone who would actually have a valid opportunity to win would need to do in any of these races. So
Right.
I think we're coming towards a balance. I want to make sure that we have the opportunity to talk about it with Representative McCoy, because this was her amendment, and I promised her that I would be in communication with her out of respect before we proposed anything. So not that I didn't promise her that she would need to agree with it, but I just told her that before we formally propose something, that I would be in communication with her, because we really worked on this issue on the House side.
So Senator Vyhovsky and I had a good heart-to-heart on Friday, I think, with this particular provision. There are other ones that she and I will have probably further heart-to-hearts. But I had at least 2 emails from clerks who had asked for 5 o'clock on Thursday, close of business on Thursday. One of them came from the Hartford town clerk, I believe. And, you know, to Senator Vyhovsky's point, not that I'm trying to put words in her mouth, that does diminish someone's ability to kind of decide at the last minute to jump into a race, but it does give a nod, I think, to our clerks, so that literally as they're driving home, they can say, phew, all I got to do is send that up in the morning and I'm all set. So I don't know whether that's a little bit more in line with what you're thinking? And I don't know whether Senator Beal, I know you said
The Thursday before the election,
yes.
that would be
Thursday
ideal
before.
for us. That would be
That
ideal
would-
for us.
I mean, it's only a matter of a few hours, except you said Friday at noon.
Right.
It's what, 9, 10 hours later. But yes, Senator Cliff.
Well, it does, I'll just say that that's a full business day. So if there's
Yeah.
a technological problem or, what we will literally be doing is receiving this written petition from the candidates, putting it into our system, making sure that our system acknowledges that, and then that it's reflected on the tally sheet. So there is, I think the technology will be okay, but there are a couple of moving parts.
Okay.
So if we had the close of business on Thursday, that would give our team who is working far beyond the close of business on Thursday, the week before the election, time to make sure that the system is getting it and that it's appropriately being seen in the system and in the tally sheet. So what we'll have to do is receive them, enter them, and then double check to make sure that those tally sheets are reflecting that information appropriately.
Did you add anything or no? Okay.
I just want to say, I don't know why, I mean, I appreciate access to democracy, but I as a candidate have had to be thoughtful and intentional many, many, many days before the election. So I think candidates need to be intentional. We have an exemption for death, right?
Well, we're thinking of.
We would like for it to
I
be.
think we need, but I don't know why we should afford write-in candidates any more leeway than any other candidate, quite frankly. I just don't, we aren't allowed to register at the last minute. I don't know why a write-in should be able to. I mean, we're all have an opportunity to weigh in and say, I want to be a candidate. But I don't think this is limiting access to democracy. I mean, we may just have to disagree on that. I think a Thursday at 5 p.m. makes absolute sense and gives them a day. I mean, I think they've already been afforded a lot more relaxed situation than any of us who are actually getting out there in the fray and declaring a candidacy and having gone to all the forums and done all the work of being a candidate, which is a ton of work. To have somebody at the last minute, I don't know why we're giving them more leniency than we're giving them. So I think that 5 o'clock on Thursday.
It's just a suggestion.
No, I think it's a good idea.
I think all of this conversation is balancing those two things, access to democracy and having a smooth and efficient election. And, in terms of a smooth and efficient election, having a registration that has all of the names that somebody goes by. So my name is Sarah Lauren Hibbert. Some people might write me in as Sarah Hibbert. Some people might write me in as Lauren Hibbert. The clerk wouldn't necessarily know that I go by both names. Primarily I go by Lauren, obviously, that's how you all know me. But when I'm getting a reservation at a restaurant, sometimes Sarah Hibbert comes out and I'm like, oh, I don't know where that came from. Or like any official place, I'm Sarah Hibbert. And so a lot of people have that. So all of the names that you would go by, any alternative spellings that could be there because people don't always know how to spell Clarkson. And so that would really help the town clerk on that day be able to count all the votes for you or for me. And I think it's really important that if your name is already on the ballot in any race, you're counted as a write-in. That's the law now. We don't have clerks count fictitious people. So this is just a way to continue to streamline the process. Again, at that close of polls. And for large towns, this is a huge burden to count the write-ins, and this is a priority of the clerks. So I appreciate the discussion that you've had about that balance and would support anything the week before the election.
Next.
Next is campaign finance. I'm going to turn that over to Sean.
Yeah, so the campaign finance, this is, I think, one of the pieces that we don't see. I think council someone may have put over that shared. There were the three sections relating to reporting in 17 VSA 2901 as well as 2970 and 2971. And the bill that passed out of the House did have all of these sections in changing the independent expenditure only political committee. And what the bill in the House aims to do and what we supported was really closing what had been a loophole or at least a difference in treatment in the way that the filings from independent expenditure only political committees on public questions, and also potentially for candidates, if you're unaffiliated with the candidate, but ran, say, an attack ad on one candidate for mayor. You wouldn't have to put your disclose your treasurer, where funds came from, and so forth. Although if funds came from other places, you'd technically be a PAC. But I think that wasn't clear to a lot of folks, particularly at the local level. So that's what we saw in those changes that were in the bill out of the House. And as we had talked on the House side, though, the Attorney General's office also had some thoughts about how to make the language clearer and more enforceable. Since they're charged with enforcing it, obviously we wanted to hear what they had to say, and we wanted to be in
So
alignment.
more to come from the AG.
Well, the piece that came over to you now is the part that from the AG. The AG was.
We worked on
We
language
worked
with
on
them.
that.
Okay.
This is under the Department of Motor Vehicles registrations.
Before
That's a different piece.
right above that, campaign finance.
I don't see any campaign finance. All I have from you that was attached was Title 17, elections, qualification and registration.
Email that I got from Tim Devil.
I just, was it in the body of the email or was
Yes.
it in the attachment?
Yes.
Oh, it's in the
Yes, the
body of the attachment.
So in section 2901, what it aims to do is, there's in the list of 2901 is the definitions. In that list of definitions, we also were able to streamline the changes, so actually it'd be fewer changes than in the bill that passed out of the House, which is always cleaner.
And made it more straightforward language, common language that anyone can understand.
So that changes that definition from had been the independent expenditure only political committee to self-funded person acting alone on public questions and self-funded person acting alone unaffiliated with candidate. And what that refers to is to make clear, as we've had with the campaign finance and in the new campaign finance system, a lot of questions we've had up are, if I self-fund, is that a contribution? Do I have to report it? The answer according to law is yes, but it's something that we found people need a lot of reminders for. So really emphasizing with the office hours we do with campaign finance guide. We got this language here, and the Attorney General office agreed that it makes it clear that if you're self-funded, even if you're acting alone, so you're not a PAC. But if you're spending over $1,000 to influence a public question, or spending over $1,000 to influence an election, even if you're not affiliated with one of the candidates, that you're allowed to spend as much as you want. There's no cap on that, but you are required to report it, and that's where 2970 and 2971 come into play for the campaign reports that you would report on.
So, sorry, this language, we don't have, this is in Tim's email. The one I have for you, I just have one little tiny paragraph under campaign finance.
Yeah, that's all it is. I think.
It's 2901, section 10 and 2970.
Yeah, I mean, we have like two sentences here.
Okay.
I mean, so I'm having a hard time following this discussion. Sorry.
Well, we could have Tim walk through it when.
I mean, I'm just.
Yeah, maybe we'll just,
Yeah, that-
maybe we wait for a clean copy of some of the changes to really
That's
document.
Yeah, because the email just has this one little short paragraph. It says SOS is seeking to clarify language about the substitution of the independent expenditure only committees, AKA super PACs, with the political question campaigns.
Mhm.
Although I'm unsure exactly how SOS is waiting to hear back from the AG's office. And then his comment is, we'll wait for language. So. I don't
And
see any of that.
we have now sent Tim the language, but it probably has not been forwarded to you.
Okay.
But
so
the
I'm
big
not-
pieces here are, we just want to make it clear that if you're a person, which under the law is an individual, corporation, labor organization, public interest group, yada, yada, your person has a broad definition, and you are making an expenditure that you are self-funding without anybody else contributing that has an impact on a public question or a candidate, that you are disclosing, just like you would have to if you were a PAC.
Senator Yoski.
Is the threshold for a PAC spending $1,000? Okay.
Yeah.
It's the
I
same.
know for candidates it's 500, so I was unsure why they were misaligned.
So what we're now requiring is anything spending over $1,000 or more has to register, is required to
Report.
report.
My sort of underlying question, though, and maybe the Secretary of State's office has an answer to that, is that that's presently misaligned because candidates have to report at 500, and I feel like PACs and others should too. So I don't know, do you know if there's a reason why they're different?
Off the top of my head, I don't know, Sean, if you do. I mean, it's been that way for a long time, so I don't know why. I think probably the rationale is that candidates should be very transparent about how they're funded and how they are spending money. But one can make the same argument about a PAC or an individual. And I think a key difference is, for some of these, probably for a candidate, $500 is more respectively more money to them than $1,000 to a PAC. But that's my other guess, but I don't know historically why that's done.
Okay, I appreciate that. I think with, the so many challenges with dark money and PAC, I don't think they should be allowed to spend more without disclosing, even if it's been that way a long time.
Oh, so because it's been $1,000 for a while.
Yeah, I just don't know that it should be.
Okay.
I don't disagree. It's nice to have things aligned. But but for different candidates, of course, it's not all aligned for all the candidates either.
Sure.
Really?
Depending on the office.
I thought it was just 500.
It's 500 for any candidate.
Oh,
Signatures are not aligned by office.
Right.
For campaign finance, it is.
Oh, right, and this is just the requirement. I was mixing up
Yeah.
the gifts. I was mixing up the gifts with the
Yeah.
reporting. So the reporting requirement is if you 500 or more.
For candidates, but it's
For
1,000 or more for PACs.
Yeah, well, because they're, of course, not
I-
people.
I think that they should have the same transparency
I don't
requirements that we
disagree.
do.
I
In
think
fact, I think they should have more transparency.
I think part of the, and again, not knowing, the origin of it, but I think part of the question with the small dollars, and we really worked through with the Attorney General's office, and as we talked through how we're gonna communicate these rules with clerks and get them out to the public, is that when people hear PAC, they think of big, it's like big, right? Whereas technically, if Lauren and I got together and we both wanted to spend $100 because we really didn't like a public question that was up in Montpelier, if we coordinated on that, we're a PAC.
Oh, yeah, and
And-
we see that locally in
Yeah.
local
Yeah.
elections all the time.
Yeah.
So we're looking for a definition that works for Sean and I opposing or supporting, let's say we're supporting the school budget. We're on the record, we support the school budget. So if Sean and I want to work together to support the school budget in Montpelier and we both put in $600, we are a PAC and we need to disclose. And I think that is some of the challenge with all of this, is that a lot of local people do not consider what they're doing to be PAC activity, but they
Yeah.
are. They think of the dark.
God forbid.
No, I certainly support clarifying and adding this. I just also, in the further movement of transparency, would support lowering that threshold from 1,000 to 500.
And that, I hate to say it, that would align with a local effort more than $1,000.
I don't believe we have an official opinion at this moment on
Okay.
lowering.
But what you do have an official opinion about what you want to name this, and
Yes, we
that
do.
is not here.
We want to call this a self-funded person acting alone on a public question, or a self-funded person acting alone unaffiliated with the candidate. And yes, that is a huge mouthful, but we could not come up with any name with the Attorney General's office that did not explain clearly what we were talking about.
So it's a self-funded person acting,
Alone on a public question.
Or on behalf of the candidate.
Unaffiliated.
Another person acting alone, unaffiliated.
Now, if an individual person was acting alone, but was unaffiliated, oh my God. What if they were running an attack ad against a candidate or running an ad for a candidate? They're not officially affiliated with the candidate, but they are doing something on behalf.
They would have to.
That would fall in here.
Unless, so let's say I'm running an ad in support of you, Senator Bohosky, but I didn't give the money to you,
Mhm.
then I would have to
Okay,
disclose it. But what we mean by unaffiliated is not a direct
Okay,
contribution. Like I can give you as much money as I want to up to a threshold, right? But, and you have to disclose that I give you money.
Mhm.
But as soon as the law doesn't require you to disclose it, because I'm not giving it to you, I'm just doing it in an unaffiliated way. The law needs to require disclosure as well.
okay, I just wanted to make sure that that was captured in this definition. I definitely
Yes,
support it.
yes, it is. And it also addresses, I think you also heard testimony after we were here last time. And the witness spoke to the risk of the way it was previously worded as being interpreted that anybody who gives donations to candidates would have to report here as well as the candidate reporting for them. That certainly wasn't the intent. That wasn't our interpretation before. We're not sure it would be otherwise, but in more explicitly in the language here makes it clear that the person would have to, by bringing in the self-funding, that they would have to self-fund $1,000 and make that expenditure of $1,000 or more, which by that token would ensure that if I give you $1,000, it's not self-funding, making funding you.
But if I spend $1,000 on door hanger tag pieces, I have to disclose that I did that.
As a candidate, yes.
Or
Or as an on.
unaffiliated.
And then,
right.
yes, not.
I realize that I shouldn't have been the one,
Right.
but
Yeah.
if a community member decided and took that upon themselves,
Yes.
they would have to disclose that.
And you have to file a mass media report.
Yes.
Correct. Yeah,
Oh, those are the lists.
yeah, file one.
Door hangers are considered mass media.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yes.
Where did we put that in? Why are we? I'm sorry. Let's just forget I even opened my mouth.
If you're distributing that amount of literature, I think that is considered door hangers.
No, I
I
do.
might be.
My point is, then you also have to report it on your bi-weekly campaign finance report. So you're doing it twice. That's the only thing I'm doing.
So right now, I don't know anybody who reports their palm cards, which are used as
No,
door
it's-
hangers and everything else as mass media.
The example here was X person against the candidate, though, or in favor.
But if they're
against,
still
don't
door
they?
knocking it, they're still taking part in the same
Oh,
activity.
I see.
Yeah, and then I think the intent behind them, and again, not being here when either was enacted, but the difference is that under 2970 and your, financial, the disclosures, those filings are really acting like a ledger. You're reporting, this is the money that came in, this is the money that went out. And so the money that went out to buy door hangers is reported there, and it's really after the fact.
on the other.
Yeah.
By everything.
Whereas the mass media is really intended more as a notice. It doesn't tie into your ledger. It's not directly tied into your financial reporting, but it's a notice to the candidates you're running against, and that kind of transparency and disclosure, if they're being named, that there's that shorter time window that they will be notified that this mass media happened.
We do have,
Oh, sorry.
to Senator White's point, though, those mass media requirements, are those also linked to these independent individuals?
They are. That was, so the three sections you'll see when it comes through are 2901, which is the definitions, 2970, which are the financial reports, and 2971, which is the mass media, and all three of those together.
And the thing that I was gonna say is,
Yeah.
we really strove when we built our new campaign finance system to make the reporting of mass media simpler, and I think you will find, so.
Hope so.
Thanks, because I have to say mass media is the one thing that is a real true pain in the tuchus.
Yeah, especially when you have three people and you're technically all.
Yeah, that's a big part of the traffic. Okay, do you have another one?
Yes,
Okay. So the DMV one did come through? Sorry. I'm sorry.
It was my accountant.
Okay.
You might want to go take it.
So the Department of Motor Vehicles provision did come through, or didn't? We can,
Yes, that we have,
okay,
but
that,
it's come through just a.
okay, yeah, and so
yeah,
it's a very few,
That
minor
was the attachment.
minor changes and cleanup there, and really to align the way the Department of Motor Vehicles sends over information as part of the AVR, the automatic voter registration. And so one piece here's that due to, I think, agreements, lawsuits the DMV has had, people aren't required to test to their citizenship when they get their driver's license. If they don't attest that they're a citizen and DMV doesn't have, proof of them being a citizen, then that information doesn't come over to us. So the statutory change that you see there really just makes that part specific, that people are allowed to opt out. So if they check the box saying, still an opt out.
They can still get a driver's license. They just.
They can look at the driver's license, not registered to vote. Yep. But even if they, regardless of whether they do or don't opt out, if they haven't attested to their citizenship and the DMV doesn't have a record of their citizenship, then they aren't registered to vote either.
Okay.
That's the one thing.
Yes,
Sorry.
that's correct.
That's current practice. That's current practice. So this is really just clean up to line that up. We also bring in for sharing the address, the E911 address, which I think was
But we have that on the registration form. You have your mailing address and your email.
in the physical, yes. And it's when the statute was written, it just said physical address. They didn't call it even 911. So we just bring that. So it's really just a couple of cleanup items in that way. That's
And how do you feel about ours? Larry suggested, or.
I don't know
would
if
you-
we understand your suggested one on this.
No, not on that one. No.
No,
I
we
meant
have
overall.
4 more things.
Oh,
Yeah.
3 more things.
Just the Department of Motor Vehicles.
okay,
That's why I was puzzled by it.
okay, all right.
we have one just on justice of the peace. We referenced this in our testimony when we were here on the 9th as well, just in section 25. The bill that came over from the House had that for parties, it moved up the date of nominations for party committees or caucuses to nominate JPs from after the primary to the third Monday in July. And what this did was we just wanted to make sure that independents who were filing their petitions to run for justice of the peace have the same deadline as people who are nominated by caucuses and committees. So that was moved. That was the one suggestion we had for justice of the peace as well, so that they would give their petitions to the clerk as its current practice, but they would have till the third Monday in July to do so as well. It just gives saying this the committees.
Which is how many weeks before the election? So no one, mostly people track back from the election, right? So it's due a month before the election, or less than a month.
less than a month.
But these are names that go on the November ballot, but it's really important. So this isn't a race to get these names on the August ballot.
Primary ballot.
These names do not go on the primary ballot. They go on the November one, but the deadline really matters to us because right after the primary, we are starting ballot preparation for the general. So that the justice of the peace, the prior deadline made it very tight for us to be able to get the names from the clerks and proof the names and send it back. There's a lot of steps in ballot production. Our timeline post primary is extremely tight. And so we really need the clerks to have more time to push the nomination for JP up in the calendar year so that there's more time for us to get those names and then for us to verify those names with the clerks before the primary crunch, which happens in August.
Yeah, and this is one that we found. Oh, I'm sorry.
And it's the reason that because you don't have the names of who's going to be on the November ballot for any of the races on the primary ballot until after the primary. Is the crunch that happens here because they're not verified already for the primary ballot?
Well, yeah, the crunch is really more for the clerks. But again, these are local elections, so it really doesn't impact our office directly, but where it impacts the clerks and twofold. One is for our capacity when we can proof all the names on the front of the ballot because we have all the consent to candidate forms. And so our team goes over multiple times to make sure there's no errors. The back of the ballot, the questions and the piece really rely on the clerks to do those proofing. When those nominations are coming in after the primary, you have clerks who some are just open 2 hours a week. Right after the primary, they're tied up with their getting ready for the canvass, certifying results, and being crunched with getting information into our system for us to put on the ballot. And we just see a lot of more, not a lot, but a significant number of typos. I'd say most of the errors on ballots are related to justices of the piece, because I think they're rushed from clerks who have a lot on their plate at that time. And it also didn't seem to be any reason not tied to the primary or a lot of other sides. There didn't seem to be, we couldn't find a reason for why it was held, why that deadline was mid-August. We talked to all three state party chairs and directors, and they all had no problem with it being moved to July. I think one suggested moving it back to why couldn't it be at March at town meeting. The short answer for that is it's in the Constitution. The state Constitution is the justice of the peace are elected in the general election. Not annual meetings, even though it's a local office. So that was the rationale there. And by moving it into July allows the clerks to clear the deck, enter it into the system, proof that we can at least get that side of the ballot approved. Public questions, I know local local select boards really like every last minute, so we're not going to change the deadline on that, but that at least allows the clerk to focus on those questions and the canvas certified.
Do JPs not do a candidate consent form?
Yeah, why don't they just, I was thinking
they-
exactly the same thing, which is here we are thinking about consent form for something else. Why don't we just have a consent form for JPs?
Well, they go to the clerk. So at the local level, the clerks, would have that, but it just doesn't give that.
Why don't we just have
Second.
the same form? Why don't we have the same thing except for justices of the peace and have a consent form? Because then we
I
can.
think that maybe, but I think it's more a matter of where it's filed, right? So if they're in our possession.
Filed with the clerk's office.
Oh, right. So the clerk's office can do that proofing. I think that's the issue. Just when you have 247 clerks, some who work a few hours a week, it's not that they don't have that information, but to do the entering and the proofing, and then to get, when it goes on the ballot, there's a chance for errors to be made.
Not if you consult the consent.
So with JPs, correct me if I'm wrong, they don't have petition process. They're nominated by the party.
Well, if they're independent.
But unless they're independent. And so then the party is providing the nominations, the slate of
Right.
JPs.
But a JP still could take it upon, have to sign a consent form. That's easy enough to pass around.
Yeah, I think in that, again, I think that's not really what the.
Formalize it a
Yeah.
tiny bit, which may not be a bad thing, having been through this process many times
Yeah.
with our local committees.
Something to consider in the
Yeah.
threat.
I mean, if we're looking for consent form to verify people's names, and that's the biggest problem they have, and which is why we're moving this up.
Yeah.
It does strike me that the consent form could be the authority of knowledge that we refer to.
Yeah,
It's something that we haven't considered,
Right.
so.
we should,
we
we could
certainly
certainly.
think about that.
But I think the other piece, even with that, even if the clerks did have it, the obstacle, the potential of just the number of touches of going from the clerk entering it to going into our system, us outputting the file to go to our vendor who prepares the ballots, the vendor giving it back to us to prove, as the deputy secretary said at that time, my team can be reviewing the front of the ballot. We can be working late on a Thursday night, late on whatever nights, we need it. But for the clerks to be reviewing, we're counting on 247 clerks to review and proof and send out the deadline. And if the ballot comes back and we give them just a couple days, most of them will do it. Clerks work long hours. But when you have 247, the more you can space things out and give adequate time, the more likely you are to catch potential errors.
We have two ballots. We have the general ballot and then we have the justice of peace ballot.
That's what we're talking about.
That's what they give us as a separate ballot.
It can be a separate one.
The clerk has a separate ballot, so you get to choose which one you want to do.
Yeah. Some towns have separate ballots for justice of the peace. Others are allowed to put it on the back of, to save money for the town. They can put it on the back of the general ballot. And that's something we want to provide as service to help towns save money, but it is an issue that leads to just more potential for things to go awry and typos and so forth, which is the rationale for this proposal.
And it also works better to have the JPs on the ballot that the Secretary of State sends, because we're sending it via universal vote by mail. So every voter gets a copy of the JP slate as well. So, but we want to get it right. And we have, that is where we've had errors. Speaking of errors, the next thing that we really would like some clarification in the law on is alphabetization on the ballot. Currently we are, when we prepare the ballot, we prepare it based on how the candidate is registered in our voter registration system, as opposed to what's on their candidate form. What we think, and that has been a longstanding practice, that is how you're legally registered in our state. There are anomalies between the voter registration and the candidate petition. We don't always know why, because you can update your voter registration, but there are,
Nobody seems to,
but nobody.
but people don't. I mean, they, once you're on, you
Right.
don't think you're always on.
And as you know, we get into conversations about, formalizing ID, like with the SAVE Act or with the executive order, we suspect that all, depending on how that all sort of ripples out, will mean that the voter checklists have people's appropriate legal name more frequently. And certainly we want people's appropriate legal name to be on your voter registration. But what we would like to do, and one of the reasons why we want every candidate to register in our campaign finance system, is for transparency on spending and attesting that you have not spent, even if you are under the $500 threshold. But also our plan is to use the campaign finance system needs to mimic what is on your consent form. It needs to say the exact same thing. And we want to use what is in the campaign finance system as your registered name on your ballot. And we would like this body to make that very clear so that people know that the ballot alphabetization is based on how you file your consent form and how you're registered in campaign finance.
Which is what we're trying to clarify,
The variance.
and to have the name on the ballot reflected and taken from the consent form. So we have
Yes, and
one
but
form
just,
that
just process wise, because I think it's important. I really love to explain how the laws that you make, how we take them. And what we want to do is have the candidate enter their name into the system. They spell it, they enter it. That's the way they want to be. And they have to attest that that's what on their consent form. Our staff will not be entering that information. The candidate will be. And then how we will produce the ballot is we'll pull it out of that system as the candidate entered it. So that our team is not looking at a consent form, printed word, printed signatures, not a digital, and trying to put it into the system the way that the candidate spelled it, because the candidate is going to spell
okay,
it.
but we do that already. We do that on a paper form that we give to our county clerk.
But then we're asking for the Secretary of State to decipher someone's handwriting,
Yeah.
and decipher, like,
We've done that for hundreds of years.
And
well,
there's
we have
errors.
technology that makes it so we don't have to.
Yeah.
No, but we don't have access to their system.
Well,
Right now, we take it to our county clerk.
and you'll continue to do that, but then you'll be required to register in the campaign finance system.
And that's how it'll appear
And-
on the ballot.
And that's how it'll appear on the ballot, because you're going to enter your name in the campaign finance system, and you're going to attest that this is your name as represented on your petition form. And when you enter your name into our campaign finance system, then we'll have an electronic record of everyone who's on the ballot,
Makes sense to me.
and we'll pull it out of that system.
We don't do that now.
No, we don't know.
No, but that's
So
what
right now, we do a consent form. We do three things. We register to vote when we're 18. Or when we move to a state. We then, if we're candidate, sign a consent form with our name as we want it.
yes.
And then we do our campaign finance reporting, but I don't recall having to reaffirm that that's my name.
And that's what we would like to do.
So that's separate for me. For me, that's a separate thing. But the campaign stuff, the finance stuff is separate from the consent form that we should be taking that
What
we should be taking
our
back.
ask is that the law be clear that a candidate has to put the name as they want represented on their ballot on the consent form. And then
Right.
that is also how they register in campaign finance.
Yeah.
And that is so that we can operationally take that name out of campaign finance to put on the ballot. It also is for transparency. If I'm walking around and saying, I'm going to use me because I have a confusing name. If I'm walking around and saying I'm S. Lauren Hibbert and asking all of you to sign my candidate form, that's how I should be represented
Yes.
on the ballot, and that's how I should be represented in the campaign
Agreed.
finance system, so that everyone who's like, oh, that Lauren Hibbert, that S. Lauren Hibbert or Lauren Hibbert, she seems suspicious. I want to see how she's spending money. They should be able to look it up in the
Right.
campaign finance system, and they should be able to clearly know who I am on
We're
the.
just aligning those two.
Yeah,
yeah,
It's not that they're changing where the answer is, it's confirming that the answer is the same.
And they
It's
match.
Yeah, no, I get it. I think that's good.
But yeah, I hear what your point is, yeah.
Yeah, we're not trying to create an additional barrier in any way or an additional requirement, but outside of
Marriages.
outside of requiring everyone who's a candidate to file in campaign finance, which we think
Okay.
is,
So have you gotten that language to Tim?
no, but Tim knows and is working on that language. I don't believe he needed language on that.
Right.
He was good on that. He was working on that. And then the last one is we strongly support moving the local office petition process from back to 6 weeks. We raised that issue on the House side.
Oh, good.
And we think that is an appropriate move. We didn't understand it on the House side. It wasn't really our issue, because we don't run local elections, but we were concerned about it because of ballot preparation crunches. And we support
Tim
it.
says, or you will.
Senator Bukowski.
So I want to take a step back to alphabetization.
Yes.
I totally appreciate what you're saying and support you being able to pull digitally, and having those tracked across the 3 different places. My larger question is about the fairness of alphabetizing that word.
Got it.
And there are many states and studies that have been done that there's studies that have been done that show that a higher spot on the ballot does track with generally better results.
Yeah.
And there are states that actually randomize or use a lottery to try and mitigate that fairness issue. And I'm just wondering if the Secretary of State has any thoughts on what implementing a system like that would be. I recognize you can't weigh in on the policy
But do you know other states that,
of many other states,
Yeah, I-
Pennsylvania, California,
Yeah.
many other states use different.
I know some states that use more, don't use paper, that have other forms of voting the bonds that, it'll rotate around even which candidate.
So
Oh,
everyone's
same
ballot
election.
doesn't look the same.
Right, yeah, and obviously for, paper ballot, that's not a possibility. As you say, you could have a lottery or something, so everybody's ballot would look the same, which I think is one piece that we're locked into as long as we're having paper. It's not something that we've, looked into specifically as far as how those lotteries work or what the implementation would be.
So the 2 that I know about, I didn't know that the digital ballots just sort of auto cycle, which is very interesting. The 2 I know about is Pennsylvania uses a lottery system. So once candidates are qualified, they draw a lottery number and that is their placement on the ballot. And California uses a random alphabetization where at the beginning of the election, they randomly assign the letters and that's the order that they go in. So rather than being A, B, C, D, they hit the random button and it might be Q, L, Z.
I would anticipate that if we did it, we would do so either within our election management system or through a system more like California, because that would be easier to implement.
Okay.
And we would want it to be, because we use these systems to produce our ballots, we'd want it to be something that could happen within the system.
Okay.
And we haven't talked with our vendor about how we would do that.
Okay, so the Pennsylvania lottery system would not be a preference if we moved in that direction. It would be more the system of randomly assigning the letters.
I mean, I would want to think about it a little bit more before we concretely respond, but, I think we would want any discretion to be removed from it, and having a computer do it takes that out. And I think we'd want to do it in our system so that the system knew and the system put the names in the right place, as opposed to us having to do that on each ballot.
Awesome, thank you.
So.
Those are all of our.
Okay, you're ready.
I'm sorry, all right, actually, I apologize. I had lumped 2 local ones together, but be very quick on it as we know.
Okay.
There was the 5 to 6 week one, but also in our testimony on the 9 is referred to in section 31, which section 31 of the House bill. Again, it wasn't our suggestion. We didn't weigh in on it. But this was the section that referred to terms for the various local offices in 17 VSA 2651 D.
I don't even, oh, there it is.
and F. And this was one, again, we don't have a position one way or the other, but we would like it to be clear because our read of it right now, it strikes the term that these offices can be removed, for cause. And what's left unclear is, does that mean that they can't be removed at all during that 1 year term? Or is it going the other direction that they are, they can be removed at will? And we think generally when it isn't defined, employees can be removed at will. So we think it would be interpreted that way, but because it's striking for cause and not defining that, we think it's ambiguous, and we think this being explicit for whichever way the body wants that to be we would like that, because we get questions from clerks, and while it's not our direct area, we try to help.
So these are not for elected people, but appointed people. Is that right?
Yes.
I don't know if I have an opinion one way or the other, I guess. I mean, is it because it feels kind of like an HR thing more than anything?
I think it might be something that you want to hear from VLCT on. And get clarity.
I don't really know.
I think this is a change that came from them.
Okay.
So it just may be something that we hear. And we also don't have a strong position. We just want it to be clear.
Okay, so we had 3 or 4. Can't remember the exact number.
Well, they've addressed one of them.
Yes, the 5th to 6th week we've already talked about.
And the alphabetization
Yeah,
And the write-in,
and the write-in.
well, that's true.
I think.
Well, we haven't settled it.
we have not.
Left that open on purpose.
I appreciate that. But
Um,
they did address their opinion.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
did.
So the only other one I think was striking the electronic
Oh, yeah.
voting provision.
The electronic ballot return report.
I think it's just a study, isn't it?
Yes.
Report, yeah.
But
We are not opposed to striking the requirement that we do a report on electronic ballot return. We do have concerns about electronic ballot return for a couple of reasons. One, we have cybersecurity concerns, and 2, and this is just not time to be doing that work, because we are losing federal funding left and right, and we would use federal funding for this purpose. We are committed, and just so the record is really clear, we are committed to improving access to the ballot for people who are overseas because they're serving in the military or because they're living there. We really do think electronic delivery is working well, but electronic return has additional concerns. This was not a legislative priority of our office this year, and we are okay not doing a report on it this year. We anticipate that we will need to study this in the future. We'd be open to studying in the future. We're okay if this is not the time that we do that.
My belief is it'll stay struck. Okay. I don't know why, but all of a sudden I'm really tired.
Well, that was a lot of things.
Yeah. It was. Is there anything else for the Secretary of State's office?
I don't know, but we give us a.
So
We'll think about it.
I'm not looking to add anything.
Yeah.
Let's just see what Tim comes up as a actual draft, and we can take further testimony. We don't have any rush on this bill. Take it as it comes. Okay, thank you both. Get outside and enjoy what's left of the
Yeah, I hope you
day.
guys do too.
Well,
Yeah.
remember, this is our first day of seeing the birthday girl after the birthday.
Oh, and thank you for that text.
Oh, I was thinking of,
Oh,
she's born on the same day my mother would have been 100, which is,
wow.
I love the fact that Lauren and Mom were born on the same day.
I
Yeah,
do
but-
too.
With many different years between them.
Many different years.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Well, my kids were delighted to say, you only have one more year until you're in your 50th year, because the next year I turned 49 and I'm like, oh, it's 2 years until I turn 50, but they're like, no, that's your 50th year.
I thought that's great.
My father used
You're
to
like, excuse me, we know what man.
So tomorrow, committee, we're gonna take the OPR bill and put it together with 119. I believe I sent you all the provisions of 119 as a separate bill, but we'll put it into the OPR bill. And then more on 397, which all of a sudden it's like got 5 people interested in testifying on it. So this is the flood response and
Yes, we have
Emergency
a lot of people.
Yeah.
Weigh in on that. So the next draft, see, has 119 incorporated into it.
I can ask the Ledge Council to do that if you like.
I would be in favor.
Okay.
Early childhood education is some concerns. Are you comfortable with it being in the next draft?
Yeah, the next draft, but I still have concerns about 119.
We made some
Okay.
good changes.
I'm happy to,
Share with us what her concerns.
well, I shared with you what my concerns are. I continue to have concerns about the,
Legacy thing?
no, the legacy thing, I think it's the other aspect,
It's
the.
an educated.
Agency.
And the AOE,
Yeah.
the EC3 thing, yeah.
And I think the agency of Ed would like to do the 3
Yes.
and not
They
have
wanted
it, and have 1 and 2, but not 3. So,
There we are. That is
and-
what
and,
makes
you know,
horses.
at some point, it started off being, I think, a pretty big divide between OPR and, or not OPR, sorry, between the Secretary of State's office and the agency of Ed, and then all the people that are already in that space. And we've chewed it up a little bit, and we now, instead of having 50% of the people not like it, we might be down to 5 or 10% of the people. And, you know, nothing is ever gonna come out of here with standing ovations from everybody that's been affected by that bill.
Except Veterans Month.
Yeah, true. There are some occasions when that does happen,
So
but it's rare.
I just want to say publicly, I am very grateful to the Secretary of State's office and the
As
OPR
am I.
office for having convened some of those negotiations and getting us to a better place. So
As
thank
am I.
you.
Yep. I think we made great progress as a team. And I think we're ready or close to it to see that get to the floor.
And we have our S-131 bill on the floor tomorrow.
No,
It's actually on notice because it didn't make a crossover, so it had to go to rules.
it had to go to rules today.
So it won't be on.
It's on notice
It'll
tomorrow.
be on notice tomorrow and on the floor Thursday.
Because it was on notice in the calendar today.
Yeah,
But it
but
has
if you
to go
paid
to-
attention to the floor, there was a
I
rules
did that.
committee
I
right
did,
after.
but we were not privy to what was being discussed.
Well, I can tell you that the rules committee voted to release it.
It's a good thing you're on.
So we're good for Thursday.
Yes.
Great.
Okay, thank you.